Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Dave Skold. I'm with the Department of Labor and Industries Wage and Hour Division or Labor Standards Division. And thanks for attending this webinar information session about the Women's Economic Security Engagement and Education Grant. And this is I'll share my screen. We can get going. This is a session set up to get basic information about the grant opportunity and to answer any questions that you all may have and to help you prepare to start any application that you might submit. So this is the grants page for the Department of Labor and Industry, and it's the spot. If you've been here before, if you've applied for any DLI grants, you may be familiar with this, but you'll see there's a number of grants we're offering right now. And one that I do want to highlight for you all, and some of you may be familiar with already, is the Earn Sick and Safe Time Outreach Grant. It's a very similar grant in terms of educating Minnesotans about this law, about these protections. The WESA Act is specific to those provisions of the law that we'll talk about in a minute, but the Earn Sick and Safe Time, of course, is a new law that will start on January 1st. 2024, and many of the same organizations that may apply for the WESA grant might apply also for the ESST grant. So I wanted to highlight that one, and if you want more information, you can go to that website, and there's lots of good information, and there'll be a webinar recording as well if you'd like to watch that. So we're here today to talk about the Women's Economic Security Engagement and Education Grant. And again, this is a informal education information session. So if you do have any questions at any point, please just feel free to stop me. Feel free to use the chat, raise hand, or come off mute. Any of those things. We just want to make sure that you all have the information you need if you're considering applying for this. And I'm assuming you are if you're here. So the WESA, we're now on the Women's Economic Security Act Engagement and Education Grant page here. The term WESA comes from 2014. There was a package of laws that were put together under the umbrella of WESA, or Women's Economic Security Act, and we've kept that naming to cover a number of laws, specifically around workplace rights for those that are either pregnant or those that have recently given birth. And it relates to rights to take pregnancy accommodations, to express milk in the workplace after birth, and also to take pregnancy or parental leave. Those are the three primary rights or protections that this grant would cover in terms of educating either workers or employers about those rights and responsibilities. Also want to say, as we get started, I'll scroll down the screen here and see the contact is Eric Olberding. I'm not Eric. Eric is also here on the webinar, and Eric will be the contact going forward. And there's Eric's phone number and email if there are follow-up questions of any kind throughout the process of you looking at the RFP and considering applying. All right, so let's talk about just going over some basic information about the grant. And again, we're just going to use the web page as our slides, more or less, here for the session. We can see the timeline in terms of there are a few webinars, and we're on August 10th, so we're on the second date there. The deadline to apply is August 28th, which is a Monday. The applicants will be notified who has will receive funding on September 22nd. So there is an evaluation process that goes on between August 28th and September 22nd. There's a committee that will review and score applications. And in October, the beginning of October, is when the grant projects would start. And you can see that it goes through June 30th of 2024. The reason for that is that's the state's fiscal year. So we do anticipate at this point that we will be offering grants again next year. And so many of the same organizations that may receive grants in this round or are potential good fits for this, we're hoping they would apply again next year, or if this grant does open again. So what is the point or purpose of the grant? It is to educate both employers, and we could see, different terms here, but educate, outreach, communication, engage, training. So it's both worker and employer understanding. The Earn Sick and Safe Time grant is only for worker or employee side outreach and education. The WESA grant could be utilized for both worker and or employer education of those rights and responsibilities. We did see a pretty significant expansion of these laws in the during the 23 legislative session. We've been doing a series of webinars. If you're interested in watching webinars to learn more about the changes and what they entail, those are available on our website as well. I can point you to those later if you're interested. But it was a significant expansion of the rights of workers to express milk in their workplace, to receive paid time for breaks, to express milk, to additionally that many more workers will be eligible for both pregnancy accommodations and the state's unpaid parental leave law. And probably a lot of us are familiar with the paid family medical law that will start in 2026. And the unpaid leave law was expanded significantly so that workers or employees who are in their first year of employment will now be eligible for that. So that's a significant change and will impact people for the next few years. And beyond that, it will impact people that may not be able to secure funds through the paid leave law for different reasons. All right, so eligibility. This is important in terms of who is eligible to apply for this grant. And it is nonprofit organizations, associations, and we can see on here healthcare focused groups, educational organizations, labor organizations. We have received a number of questions, and I'm going to highlight here. It says questions and responses, and I'll click on this. Open this up, and the reason I'm wanted to open this is because this relates to what we were just talking about, eligible organizations. We can see in question 1 is related to a government entity that was interested in applying, and this grant is not. Government entities are not eligible to apply for this specific grant. So we just want to make that clear. If you happen to be from a government agency entity, that this is not, you would not be eligible to apply for this grant. Although we would love to work with you on WESA, different issues related to WESA, not on this specific grant. And that's a great source as well in terms of the questions and responses. So any questions we receive, whether it's through this webinar or through phone calls or emails, we will put into that section. We will put into that document so that you, as an applicant, can review any questions that have come in. So everybody has access to that same information and feedback from the agency. I did want to note that it is $75,000 total that's available. So this is not a super high level amount, funding amount that you may see in other state grant opportunities. This is the second time we've done a similar grant to this. We did it in 2021. And at some point that might be an expanded amount, but that is the amount available. So this is not, just keep that in mind as you're assembling your application, that is the total amount of funds available. All right, So I think we've covered the basics. I'm going to open up the request for proposals. Many of you might have already done this. And I'm not going to go through everything in here. This is just, we're going to be doing an overview of the RFP. Make sure hopefully everybody has the basic information. If you do have any questions, let us know. So again, this top part of this document reviews a lot of the things that we've already covered. And we do, in the background area, you'll see that the department is looking to, we're starting to talk about the focus populations of the grant, and there's a section below in the RFP that discusses that further. But I do want to highlight this section. It says here, and it says this grant aims to educate employers about their workplace responsibilities under WESA and empower workers, especially those who encounter barriers, by teaching them about their workplace rights and options available to them when their rights are violated. So if nothing else, that's a great sentence that encapsulates what this whole grant is about and what we're trying to achieve with this grant. So we've talked a little bit about the objective. I'm going to go forward here. Focus populations, again, the state is and the department are prioritizing certain populations, certain groups. Of course, those that are pregnant or new parents makes sense. Those are the ones that are most impacted by these laws. Additionally, communities of color, immigrants, economically disadvantaged. Those that more likely, as we do our labor standards work and wage and hour work generally, areas where we see violations more frequently happen. Certain types of workers, certain types of workplaces, low wage industries, etc. Those are where we do see violations. And taking a step back, I am part of the labor standards division here at DLI, and we do oversee and enforce many different wage and hour laws, wage theft laws, overtime, child labor laws. So we are primarily an enforcement agency, but we're charged with creating compliance, with bringing employers into compliance. So this grant is part of a greater strategy of figuring out different ways to create compliance in our state. So our investigative team is working on cases where there are violations or potential violations, but we're also very interested in proactively working on potential violations and preventing them from happening in the first place. All right, and some of what I was just saying gets to some of the grant outcomes we're looking to achieve through this grant. And you can see those here. So, promoting those workplace rights, increasing compliance. Additionally, we're hoping this grant is part of that it does assist and increases some the health aspects of both the worker who's breastfeeding, who's pregnant, as well as the infant child. So grant activities, this is a great spot to kind of do some deep diving and thinking in terms of what does your organization's strength currently look like? How could you do some of these things or some similar activities? This does say, but not limited to, here in this first sentence, is applicants can achieve desired outcomes through a variety of activities, including, but not limited to. So we do want to emphasize that the department very much encourages creative types of activity proposals, and that organizations leverage their strengths and their networks to achieve some of the outcomes we're looking for with this grant. So these are examples, and these are things that many organizations do have capacity to do, but potentially there are other things as well that you as an organization could do and would like to propose. All right, so we talked about eligible organizations earlier. Here's the additionally, here's some more language about that. It also, in the question and answer document that I showed you earlier, there's some additional questions about that if you're want to know more about who's eligible and if your organization fits. And that's an area, again, where you feel free to contact us if you're uncertain. Funding, we've talked about this, and we've talked about the period of performance. So as you're creating your application, one of the important things is to think about, what types of expenses, and this is important to, area of the RFP to compare what you are proposing and does it fit within the eligible expenses and what's not eligible. It's pretty self-explanatory. 7, this is scoring. What I like to tell people here is this middle box is important or critical. When you get to when we open up the application form, after we go through this RFP, you'll see that the questions in the application form are very similar to the wording here. So when you complete your answers, your responses to the application questions, it's a great place to look and look at this sentence and then compare it to your response and see how it fits. Does it is it achieving what's being asked for? And you can see here the total points of each section that will be scored. So there's a number of sections. Each section corresponds to a question or a few questions. So there's a question on project overview, equity, program activities and services, outcomes, work plan, organizational ability, and then budget and narrative, for a total score of 100 points that the evaluation team will review and score each of those individually. So we've had a number of questions about grantee reporting requirements. So how does this work? If you have had state grants in the past, you may be familiar with kind of standard templates and process, and we would be very similar to those grants. What we do have is a reimbursement payment request form. We have an expense summary, participant forms. That is more or less what we're trying to collect as information about who you've been able to educate, train, reach out to. Some quantity and qualitative information there. And then there's a quarterly narrative report as well as a final report. And you can see both of those have templates. So those that do become grantees will become pretty familiar with these documents after the first report. So it is a quarterly report, and the quarters are on a calendar year, highlighting that here. Excuse me. All right, I'm just going to pause for a second to see if there's any questions. Okay, we'll move forward. So the next series of sections on the RFP are pretty standard state RFP grant language. So I'm not going to go through these in detail here during this info session, but would strongly encourage anyone that does apply to go through these in detail, because these are all important things, and they relate to who is eligible and different requirements for grantees. Skip forward. And if you have questions on any of those things, please submit them to Eric. You can see here that once you're ready to apply and you have your application form completed, you can either email it to Eric or you can mail it into the department. So that's your choice. It just needs to be received no later than midnight on August 28th, 11:59. Right. And there's Eric's contact information again. I'm going to go back out of the RFP, back to the web page. So here's the application form. Let's look at that here. A couple things before I jump to the application form, just the sample grant contract. So this is, if you have not had a contract from the state or it's been a while, you might want to take a look at that. But this is, we'll let you know what the contract will look like, and you can see all the red areas. That's language that will be modified with your specific organization's information or information specific to the grant that we're working on here. But this is the standard contract language if you want to see what that looks like. And then grant definitions. We talked about eligible organizations earlier, so there is some good information in here. For example, the definition of community-based organization. We might imagine we all are on the same page about a word like that or a phrase like that, but this clarifies so that everyone can be on the same page what we're talking about for this RFP. Okay, so let's jump into the application form. Hopefully that's displaying okay now. Standard contact information. And then here's the section where we get into the questions. And you may remember I was mentioning in the RFP, there's that chart, and then there's the middle column. And the middle column has different wording about what we're looking for in terms of, and then how they'll be scored. So that corresponds to a lot of these questions. And you can, once you respond to these questions here, then you'll be able to, you can look at the RFP and kind of reflect back and again, see how they fit together and if the response it works with what's being asked for. All right, so we have different sections. Equity, we've talked about the focus populations that we're looking for with this grant. Different activities and services, we've talked about that in the RFP. Again, there's some sample ones, and I'm sure many of the grantees and applicants will have versions of the activities. We'll be proposing versions of the activities that were in the sample list. But again, if you have other activities that you think would achieve the outcomes, we would encourage you to apply under those as well. Outcomes, and then there's a work plan. This is a timeline with milestones and activities, and you fill this out. We want to know about your organization, your past experience, who you are, different roles and staff that may be working on this program. Additionally, your organization's admin and fiscal capacity. We want to make sure that you're able to do the work and also able to do the administrative work that's required in reporting and things like that. So there's some series of questions there. Additionally, the budget section. So the budget section, you'll be able to fill in how much as part of your budget for this project will go to salaries and wages, benefits, how much will go to travel, supplies, et cetera, et cetera. And then your total budget amount. Then below that, there's a section to do a narrative about each of the areas that you've asked for funding for in the budget above. So if you're asking for $10,000 for personnel, for example, you'd be able to explain that goes to one person, a third of their time for this amount of for this period of months, something like that, and some type of explanation about, or it's going to go, we're going to have 7 people working on this, but it's going to be a very limited amount of their time. Just kind of however you imagine, however you're proposing that your personnel, your staff you'll be staffing this project. All right, then there's an application checklist. So this is more or less just telling you things that you'll need to do for your application. So basically you just submit the application form to Eric through the email or through mailing it into us. And then there is a Q&A on this second section, second section here about submitting applicable financial statements as required. So if you want to review that, there's a also a question in our Q&A on that. All right, so this is the fourth webinar I've done like this recently, so I think I've done it pretty quickly today, maybe too quickly. I hope that you all are getting a chance, excuse me. You've had a chance, if you have a chance to ask any questions, if you have any. But I think that's the basic overview. Eric and Betsy, also my coworker here at DLI, are there other points that we want to make?
All I would ask, hi everybody, this is Eric Colberding, is that if you plan on mailing in an application, just to shoot me an email or give me a call just to give me a heads up so that I'm aware that it's coming in and that I ensure that I get it.
All right, so yeah, we'll stick around. I know there's a lot of great organizations that have been attending these webinars and potential that would fit very well for what the agency is looking for. So would strongly encourage all of you to apply if you do have additional questions to follow up with us. But that's the basic information about the program and the grant, and we can end it here. But we'll also stick around for a few minutes in case anyone wants to stay and has any additional questions. So thanks a lot, everyone. All right, I guess that one's over.
Check. Feel better about this one?